My watch reads 6:30 in the morning. This old mechanical clock is the only one I trust. All those newfangled electronics my kids have got their hands on do nothing but lie. And so do they. I get out of bed, each movement accompanied by the familiar crunch of my joints. 78 years old is no joke. I put on a shabby robe and walk to the bathroom, trying to keep my footsteps as quiet as possible. Who am I kidding, though? Even if I rode my bike down the hallway, Shannon and Lionel wouldn't wake up. Waking up before noon is a crime against humanity in their eyes. My name is Perkins Wing. I've lived in this house in Norfolk for almost 50 years. This is where I grew old, where I buried my Martha, where I think I'll end up. But sometimes I think I'm already dead. It's just that no one has bothered to tell me. The bathroom on the first floor is my territory. It's the only place where I can be in relative peace without being met with disdainful stares. I shave carefully, as I've done all my life, with a dangerous razor. Lionel is always teasing, saying it's dangerous at my age, suggesting I buy an electric one. But I know it's not a matter of caring. They just need a bathroom. After shaving, I go into the kitchen. 7 in the morning is the perfect time. 2 more hours before any of my family deigns to crawl out of bed. I make tea and make myself some toast and scrambled eggs. Last night I hid the bread and eggs behind the cereal cans. Otherwise, there would be no trace of them left by morning. Shannon and her husband Harrison constantly eat everything I buy without even thinking that it's my groceries, bought with my pension. The kitchen is a battlefield. I see mountains of unwashed dishes left over from the night before. Beer bottles are Lionel, my son, a cab driver and part-time regular at all the bars in Norfolk. The uneaten pizza leftovers are Shannon and Harrison, who never cook, only order food. Grease stains on the table, crumbs on the floor, a dirty microwave. I jerk in disgust, but I silently clean it all up. I always do. For as long as I can remember, I've always been a cleaner. My auto shop, where I've worked for 43 years, has always been in perfect order. Every tool in its place, every detail accounted for. Martha used to joke that I washed my hands more often than a surgeon. Maybe that's why my kids and I are so different. They grew up sloppy, irresponsible, and lazy, and I can't help but wonder where I went wrong. After breakfast, I go to my office, a small room next to the garage which I reclaimed years ago. Here I keep my treasures, tools, parts for the watches I repair for fun, old photo albums and documents. It's my sanctuary, though lately even it has ceased to be safe. As soon as I open the door, I notice something is wrong. My tools aren't laying out the way I left them. I always lay out screwdrivers by size, from smaller to larger. Now they're all jumbled up. Someone's been rummaging through here while I was gone. A muffled irritation rises inside, but I suppress it. After all, why make a scene? They're just screwdrivers. I sit down at the workbench and pick up the pocket watch I've been trying to restore for the past week. It's an antique that once belonged to my father. He was a railroad man who spent his life checking this watch. This clock is my anchor in reality. As long as I fix it, I exist. I am needed. At 10:30, I hear footsteps on the stairs. It's Shannon, my daughter. In her 47 years, she looks 55, the result of perpetual dissatisfaction with life and excessive dieting. A nurse by training, she's long since given up working, preferring to stay home and complain of back pain that no one can diagnose. "Good morning," I say as I leave the office. Shannon walks by, as if not noticing me. She goes into the kitchen, opens the refrigerator, and snorts unhappily. "There's nothing in there again. Dad, you went to the store yesterday." "I bought only what I needed," I reply, knowing that I am provoking a conflict, but I can't help myself. "My pension isn't enough to feed my family." "God, you're so stingy," she rolls her eyes. "Harrison and I can barely make ends meet, and you're sitting on your money like a dragon." I don't say anything. There's no point in reminding her that her husband owns an auto parts store and makes a decent living, or that they've been living in my house rent-free for 8 years, or that she bought a new $1,000 cell phone last month. All of these things I've said hundreds of times, and it's all drowned out in her outrage and accusations. Shannon pours herself a cup of coffee and retreats to the living room, turning the TV on full volume. I go back to my office. The day has started as usual. By noon, Lionel wakes up. My son, who is 52, looks like a shabby version of me when he was younger. Same cheekbones, same nose, but everything seems blurred by years of drinking and disappointment. He works as a cab driver, though with his skills he could have been an engineer. I suggested he go to school when he was younger. He refused, said he didn't want to work for pennies like me. Now he works for even less and drinks most of what he earns. "Hello, old man," he says as he passes by. He smells of booze and cigarettes. "Got anything to eat?" "Look in the refrigerator," I say. "But there's not much left." "Shit, you're always empty." He slams the fridge door angrily. "Shannon, do you have anything edible?" That's how they communicate, through me, but not with me. I'm invisible in my own house. I am ignored, bypassed, forgotten to ask if I want anything, if I need help. I am invisible, a ghost, an annoying nuisance, a reminder of the inevitability of old age. After lunch, when Lionel leaves for work and Shannon leaves for the store, I decide to check my bedroom. I have a strange feeling that something is wrong there too. And I'm right. My bedroom, like my office, is a place where everything has its place. I know where every single thing is. And now I see that the dresser drawer where I keep my papers is not fully closed. I distinctly remember closing it. I open it and realize that the papers have been rearranged. They are not in the order I put them in. My hands begin to shake, but not from fear, but from anger. I rummage through the drawer, making sure all the papers are there. Insurance, pension papers, bank statements, everything is there. But something is still wrong. I can feel it. Suddenly it hits me, and I check the secret pocket on the inside of the drawer. That's where I kept $500 for a rainy day. The money is gone. I sit down on the bed, feeling the blood rush to my face. Which one is it? Shannon, Lionel, or Harrison, who comes home later than everyone else and likes to check to see if everything's okay? This isn't the first time this has gone missing. A month ago, my cufflinks, Martha's 20th anniversary present to me, disappeared. Before that, an antique penknife disappeared. I thought I'd just forgotten where I'd put things. Now I realize it wasn't my memory. In the evening, Harrison comes in. Tall, thin, with a perpetually wary look in his eyes. He doesn't look like a typical auto parts dealer. Too well-groomed, too reserved. We never got along. He always looked down on me like I was some redneck not worthy of his attention. And now he's living in my house, eating my food and probably stealing my money. "Good evening, Perkins," he says, hanging up his coat in the hallway. "How are you feeling?" "Fine," I answer briefly. "Anything wrong?" He looks at me with feigned concern. "You look worried." "I'm fine." I turn away and walk to the kitchen. Over dinner, which I'm making myself, no one else even offers to help, Shannon and Harrison are discussing their plans for the weekend. Lionel is still at work. He'll be back at midnight when everyone's asleep. "We're thinking of going to Virginia Beach for the weekend," Shannon says. Harrison booked a hotel room. "Good," I reply, wondering if they're going to use my stolen money to have fun. "Won't you be bored alone?" Harrison asks with the same fake concern. "No," I shake my head. "I'm used to being alone." They exchange glances that I can't decipher. Something is going on, something I don't know about. They're hiding something, planning something. I feel it with my whole being. After dinner, I return to my office and lock the door. Here, among my tools and my watch, I feel safe. Here I can think, remember, plan. I think of Martha, my wife who died 5 years ago. She was always a buffer between me and the children. She had a knack for smoothing things over, finding compromises. Without her, our family split into warring factions. The kids against me against the world. Where did I go wrong? When did I lose touch with my own children? Maybe I worked too hard? Maybe I was too strict? Or on the contrary, not strict enough? I remember Martha saying, "You give them everything they ask for, but you don't give them what they need." What did she mean? Love? Attention? I've always believed that love is shown in actions, not words. I provided for my family, fixed everything in the house, taught my children practical skills. Isn't that enough? I realize now that it wasn't. My kids needed something else that I couldn't or wouldn't give. And now it's too late. We are strangers to each other, living under the same roof by inertia and necessity. I pick up the photograph I always keep on my workbench. It's of all of us together, me, Martha, little Shannon, and Lionel. We're on the beach, all smiles. I was 40 at the time, full of vigor and confidence in the future. What happened to that man? Where did that family go? I put the picture away and go back to fixing my watch. It's the only thing that makes sense right now. Putting back together what's broken, rebuilding what once worked. If only it were that easy with family. Before I go to bed, I check the lock on my office door. From now on, I'll lock it every time I leave. I also decide to check the rest of my valuables. Tomorrow I will go to the bank and rent a safe deposit box. That's where I'll store everything that's really important to me. Lying in bed, I hear Lionel coming back. He doesn't try to be quiet, rattling around in the kitchen, turning on the TV. No one admonishes him. Shannon and Harrison have long since gotten used to his nightly returns. And me, I don't exist to them. My opinion doesn't matter. My requests are ignored. My presence barely noticed. I'm an invisible man in my own home. A ghost who is still here for some reason, even though he should have left long ago. But I'm still alive. And perhaps it's time to remind my children of that. Saturday. Shannon and Harrison left for Virginia Beach as planned. Lionel has yet to return from his night shift. The house is unaccustomedly quiet, and I savor this moment of peace as I sit on the porch with a cup of hot tea. The spring air is filled with the smell of the lilacs Martha planted along the fence years ago. Each year it blooms more lushly, as if drawing strength from the memories of its mistress. I leaf through the morning paper, one of the few pleasures I can still afford. Internet news doesn't appeal to me. Too much noise, too few facts. In my 78, I prefer to cling to the habits that have shaped me as a person. Suddenly, my gaze clings to an article in the local news section. Norfolk raises utility rates. I read more carefully. Water and electric fees have gone up 15% as of April 1st. Oddly, I hadn't noticed the increase on my last few bills. I put the paper aside and go to the file drawer where I keep all the bills. The last bill I saw was dated February, but it's already May. Where are the bills for March and April? Shannon usually puts them on the hallway table, claiming she pays them out of her own money, so as not to bother me with such trivialities. I always objected to this, but she insisted it was her contribution to the household. Now I realize I should check to see if the bills are really paid. I decide to call the utility company. I find the number in the phone book, another archaic habit that my kids make fun of. I dial the number, introduce myself, and ask about the status of the bills. "Mr. Winge, you have 3 months outstanding on your account," the woman on the other end of the line says. "The total amount is $832. If payment is not made by May 15th, we will be forced to disconnect service." I feel the blood rush to my face. Shannon has been lying to me this whole time. She hasn't paid her bills even though I've given her money for utilities every month. "I'll pay it tonight," I say, trying to keep my voice calm. Hanging up the phone, I sit still, digesting the information. Shannon was lying to me. But why? Where did the money I gave her to pay the bills go? For their trip to Virginia Beach? Harrison's new clothes? For the endless trinkets she fills her room with? I decide to check the other bills. I call the gas heating company. Same story. 3 months in arrears. I call the internet provider. 2 months in arrears. Each time I promise to pay off the debt immediately. By midday, my head is buzzing with anger and frustration. My own children are stealing from me. They're not just taking my stuff, they're taking my money, cheating me, using my trust against myself. At that moment, I hear the front door slam. Lionel has returned. Judging by his shuffling gait, he's not in the best of health. He's probably been drinking all night after work again. I decide not to confront him now. He's no use to me in his condition. Instead, I take my jacket and go to the bank to withdraw money to pay my bills. Another surprise awaits me at the bank. When I ask for my account statement for the last 6 months, I see regular withdrawals of $500 that I didn't make. Every month, the day before my pension came in, someone withdrew that amount, and I know exactly who. Can you tell me who was making these withdrawals? I'm asking the manager. According to our records, it was you, Mr. Winge, using your card and PIN, she replies, looking at me with a slight suspicion. I nod, not wanting to explain that I never made those withdrawals, that my son must have found my card and recognized the PIN, that he is stealing from his own father. After the bank, I go to the utility office and pay all the debts. Then I pay for gas and internet. In total, I spend almost $2,000, a significant portion of my savings. But I feel no relief, only a deafening, dull ache somewhere in my chest. I get home by 3 o'clock. Lionel is still asleep. The house is silent, and I decide to take a moment to think about the situation. I go into the kitchen, make myself some tea, and sit down at the table. What do I know for sure? My children are stealing my money. They don't pay for utilities even though they take money from me to do so. They go through my things, taking what they like. They treat me like I'm invisible, like a nuisance they have to put up with. But why? What have I done to deserve this attitude? I've always been a good father, worked hard to provide for my family, never drank, never laid a hand on the kids, never cheated on Martha. I educated them, taught them everything I know, and this is how they repay me. My thoughts are interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Lionel comes into the kitchen looking all bruised and gaunt. "Hey, Dad," he says, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Why are you so glum?" I look at my son, the man I once held in my arms, taught to ride a bike, comforted after the first heartbreak. Now I'm faced with a stranger, a thief, an alcoholic, and I feel unbearably sad. "Nothing," I reply. "I'm just tired." "What do you have to be tired of?" he snorts. "Sitting at home all day, doing nothing." I don't answer. There's no point in starting this conversation now. I'm not ready yet, not strategized. Instead, I decide to keep watching, gather more information. "Are Shannon and Harrison coming back tomorrow?" I ask. "Yeah, tonight," Lionel nods. "They're having a blast, judging by the pictures on Instagram." I nod as if I know what Instagram is and go to my office. There I lock the door and sit down at the workbench. Working on the clock has always helped me think. In the evening, when Lionel leaves for work, I decide to look around his room. I know it's an invasion of privacy, but after everything I've learned, I feel I have the right to do so. Besides, it's my house. Lionel's room looks like a tornado went through it. Clothes are strewn across the floor. Empty beer bottles line the walls, dirty plates of food on the table. The smell is so strong that I want to open the window immediately. I look around, not sure what I'm looking for. Proof of his theft? I don't need it. I already know he's guilty. Maybe I just want to understand what's going on in his life, what's brought him to this state. I notice a stack of envelopes on the bedside table. I take the top one. It's a bank statement. It's not my bank. It's someone else's. I open it and see an impressive amount of money in the account, over $30,000. I'm surprised. Where does Lionel get that kind of money? He's barely making ends meet, always asking me for a payday loan. I go through the rest of the envelopes and find several more statements, all with impressive amounts. I also find receipts for money transfers to somewhere overseas, the Cayman Islands. I'm no financial expert, but even I know it's offshore. Why would Lionel need an offshore account? I put all the documents back in their place and leave the room, feeling even more confused than before. What's going on in my family? Who are these people living under my roof? In the evening, I can't sleep. I toss and turn in bed, going over in my head everything I've learned during the day. My kids are stealing from me. They have some secret accounts I don't know about. They lie to me, ignore me, use me. And I don't understand why. Toward morning, I finally fall asleep, but my sleep is restless, full of nightmares. I dream that I'm standing in the middle of an empty house, calling for my children, but no one answers. I go from room to room, but everywhere is empty. Then I realize that the house isn't just empty, it's abandoned. The wallpaper is peeling off the walls, the floor is rotten, water is dripping from the ceiling. And I hear voices behind the wall, laughter. It's my children laughing at me. I wake up in a cold sweat. It's light outside the window. It's Sunday. Shannon and Harrison are coming back today. I should be ready for the confrontation, but I don't know how to start it yet. After breakfast, I decide to go to the garage and rummage through some old tools. It's always helped me calm down. In the far corner, behind the workbench, I notice a box that wasn't here before. I open it and freeze in amazement. The box is full of my things. A watch that I thought was lost, cufflinks from Martha, a penknife, an old coin collection that I've collected all my life. Everything that's gone missing over the years is stacked here like a safe. But why? Why would Lionel steal my stuff just to hide it in the garage? Is this some twisted form of control, or was he going to sell it but didn't have time? I decide to put the stuff back where it belongs. Let him think I didn't notice anything. For now. By evening, Shannon and Harrison return. They look rested and satisfied. Shannon even brings me a souvenir, a fridge magnet with a view of Virginia Beach. Such a cheap gesture, almost insulting in light of what I now know. "How was the trip?" I ask, trying to sound interested. "Great," Shannon exclaims. "The hotel was amazing, right on the beach, and the restaurant. Dad, you should have seen the lobsters." I nod, thinking about how many utilities could be covered by the cost of those lobsters. "Very happy for you," I say, and retire to my room. Later that evening, as I go into the kitchen to get tea, I hear a muffled conversation in the living room. Shannon and Harrison haven't noticed me, and I stop in the shadows of the hallway, listening. "We're going to have to decide something soon," Harrison says. He's getting more and more suspicious. "I know," Shannon replies, "but it's not time yet. We have to wait until all the paperwork's ready." "What paperwork?" "Just send him to a nursing home and be done with it." I freeze, afraid to move so as not to reveal my presence. "It's not that easy," Shannon sighed. "We need his consent or a medical opinion that he's incompetent, and he's still out of his goddamn mind." "Then buy that report." Harrison is clearly annoyed. "You know doctors. Pay someone." "Where's the money coming from?" Shannon snapped at me. "We're barely making ends meet as it is." Harrison snorts, "Oh, come on, don't be so pompous. We've got money. We'll have more when we sell this house." "Sell the house? My house?" I can feel the ground slipping from under my feet. They're planning to put me in a nursing home and sell my house. The house I built with my own hands, where I lived my whole life, where I buried my wife. They want to take away everything I have. "Either way," Shannon continues, "we need to proceed with caution. If he realizes what we're planning, he might rewrite the will. After all, the house is in his name." "What about Lionel?" Harrison asks. "Does he know?" "Of course," Shannon replies. "He'll get his share when we sell the house. In the meantime, he can keep withdrawing money from his father's account. He's good at it. The old man hasn't even noticed. I can't listen to any more. I quietly go back to my room, close the door, and sit on the bed. I'm shaking with anger and resentment. My own children are planning to get rid of me like I'm junk. They are stealing my money, lying to my face, preparing the ground for my banishment from my own home. Suddenly, all the pieces of the puzzle fit together. Lionel steals my money and transfers it into secret accounts, preparing for the moment when they sell the house. Shannon and Harrison don't pay utilities, racking up debt, perhaps hoping that a blackout or water outage will make me agree to move into a nursing home. They went through my papers, looking for house deeds, wills, bank statements. All this time I thought I had just become invisible to my children. But the truth is much scarier. They see me very well. They see me as an obstacle, as a problem to be solved, an asset that can be converted into money. I lie awake all night thinking about what to do next. By morning, the decision is made. I will act. I will not let my children rob me of my home and my dignity. I will not be the uncomplaining victim of their greed. The first thing I'll do is go to the bank and close my account. Then I'll get a good lawyer. Martha always said, "Trust but verify." I've trusted for too long. Now it's time to check. At dawn, I get up, get dressed, and leave the house without breakfast. No one notices me leaving. Everyone is still asleep. I walk down the street, breathing in the fresh morning air, feeling determination fill me with every step. Morning Norfolk greeted me with a chill and fog drifting over the deserted streets. I walked to the bank, feeling each step painful in my knees, but that physical pain was nothing compared to the pain that plagued my soul. 78 years of life, and this is what I had come to, betrayed by my own children, whom I had raised, loved, and for whom I had built a future. The bank opened at 9, and I had another half hour. I went to a small cafe across the street and ordered coffee and scrambled eggs. An elderly waitress, about my age, smiled at me understandingly, as if she recognized in my eyes a reflection of her fate. "Rough morning, sir?" she asked, pouring coffee. "A hard life," I replied, and she nodded understandingly, not demanding an explanation. At 9:05, I was already sitting in front of the bank manager, a young man named Bradley Tuff, with impeccably styled hair and a look of polite indifference. "What can I do for you, Mr. Wedge?" "I want to close my account and transfer all my money to a new one," I said firmly, "and I want only me to have access to that account. No extra cards, no power of attorney, nothing." Bradley raised his eyebrows slightly but maintained his professional equanimity. "Of course, sir. May I ask the reason?" "Family emergency," I answered dryly, "and I need a statement of all transactions for the last year, every withdrawal, every transfer." While Bradley did the paperwork, I pondered the next steps. Closing the account is just the beginning. I need a lawyer who specializes in family law and real estate, and I need to check all the paperwork on the house, making sure I still own it outright. With a new bank card in my pocket and a thick folder of statements under my arm, I headed to Holt & Associates, a law firm 3 blocks from the bank. I wasn't familiar with them, but the sign looked solid, and the window listed services including real estate and probate law. I was received by Jet Holt himself, a reserved man in his 60s with a shrewd eye and a neatly trimmed gray beard. I outlined the situation to him, without concealing details or embellishing the facts. He listened attentively, making notes in his notebook, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "Mr. Winge," he said at last, "your situation, unfortunately, is not unique. I've encountered similar cases more than once. The good news is that the law is on your side. The house belongs to you, and no one can force you to leave it or go to a nursing home against your will." "And the bad news?" I asked. "The bad news is that your kids probably won't stop. If they're willing to go that far, they may try to challenge your legal capacity, especially if your daughter has connections in medical circles." I nodded. That was exactly what I had feared. What do you suggest? Offense is the best defense, Holt replied. I suggest preparing eviction notices for your children. You, as the owner, have the right to decide who will live in your house. At the same time, we can update your will to protect your assets. How long will that take? I can prepare the notices today. As for eviction, by law, they must be given at least 30 days. I've been thinking. A month under the same roof with people who plan to put me in a nursing home. It wasn't going to be easy. Okay, I finally said. Let's start with the notifications. Holt and I spent the next few hours working on the paperwork. I gave him all the information he needed, including the full names of Shannon, Harrison, and Lionel, their dates of birth, and how long they had lived in my home. We also discussed updating the will, and I decided to exclude the children as heirs. Instead, I decided to bequeath the house to a local homeless animal shelter. Martha had always wanted to help abandoned dogs and cats. When I walked out of Holt's office, it was almost 3 o'clock on the clock. I was holding a folder with 3 official eviction notices, signed by a lawyer and stamped with the firm's seal. I felt strange, devastated, and yet filled with determination. On the way home, I stopped by one more place, the utility office. There, I not only confirmed that all previous debts were cleared, but I paid my bills 3 months in advance. I also changed my contact information so that all notifications would come directly to me instead of through Shannon. I got home around 5 in the evening. Shannon and Harrison were watching TV in the living room, and Lionel was fiddling around in the kitchen from the sounds of it. No one even asked where I'd been all day. "Good evening," I said, entering the living room. My voice sounded more confident than I felt. "I need to talk to you. All of you." Shannon reluctantly pulled herself away from the screen. "About what, Dad? We're actually watching a movie." "It's important," I insisted. "Lionel," I called out to my son, "come here, please." Something in my tone made them wary. Harrison turned off the TV, and Lionel came out of the kitchen wiping his hands on his jeans. "What's up, man?" he asked, sinking into a chair. I remained standing, looking down at them. It gave me a small but psychological advantage. "I paid all the utility bills yesterday," I began, "all the arrears for the last 3 months. Shannon visibly tensed, but quickly pulled herself together. "What are you talking about, Dad? I told you I was paying them." "You lied," I replied calmly. "The bills hadn't been paid since February. We were threatened with disconnection of all services in a week." "There must be some mistake," Harrison interjected. "Shannon always pays on time." "There's no mistake," I shook my head. "I personally talked to representatives of all services, and that's not the only thing I learned." I turned to Lionel. "You withdrew $500 from my account every month before the pension came in. And don't deny it, I have all the statements." Lionel turned pale, but immediately went on the offensive. "You gave me the card. You said I could take money when I needed it." "I never said any such thing," I countered. "And we both know it." There was a long pause. I watched them exchange glances, silently deciding how to proceed. Finally, Shannon straightened up on the couch. "Okay, Dad, there may have been some misunderstanding about paying the bills. I'll fix it. And Lionel will pay you back, won't you, Lionel?" Lionel mumbled something unintelligible. "But it's not just that," I continued. "I also know about your plans to send me to a nursing home." Now, Shannon was pale too. Harrison, on the other hand, was blushing, his neck blotchy. "Who told you that?" Shannon was outraged. "It's absurd." "I heard your conversation last night," I said. "Every last word. About how you're going to buy my medical certificate of incapacity. About how you plan to sell my house and split the money." There was an oppressive silence. I could see them frantically thinking about their next words, trying to find a way out of the situation. "Dad," Shannon finally said, her voice soft, almost caring. "You misunderstood. We did discuss the nursing home, but only because we're worried about you. You live alone in that big house." "I don't live alone," I interrupted. "You all live here, on my property, using my electricity, my water, my internet. You eat my food, spend my money, and yet you're planning to get rid of me." "Dad, you're exaggerating," Lionel interjected. "No one is planning to get rid of you. You're our father, and we love you." Those words, spoken with false sincerity, were the last straw. "Love you?" I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. "You ignore me, steal from me, lie to my face. Is that what you call love?" "Listen, old man." Harrison rose from the couch, his voice hard. "You're out of line. We tolerate your quirks, your nagging, your paranoia. We care about you, even though you do nothing to make our lives easier." "Care?" I took a step toward him. "You've lived in my house for free for 8 years. I haven't seen a dime of rent from you, not a single word of thanks. You treat me like a nuisance, like an old piece of junk you should get rid of." "Because I am," Shannon shouted, her face contorted with anger. "You've always been a terrible father, always working, never had time for us. And now you're playing the victim." "I worked so that you could have a decent life," I argued, feeling a wave of anger rising inside me. "So you could have an education, a roof over your head, food on the table." "We didn't need your roof and your food," Shannon shouted. "We needed a father, someone who would listen, who would support, who would understand. And you were always cold, distant, busy with your damn machines and tools." "Stop it, Shannon." Harrison tried to calm her down, but she couldn't stop herself. "No, let her know. Let her know what it was like to grow up with a father who thought his only responsibility was to bring home money, who didn't come to school concerts, didn't remember birthdays, wasn't interested in our problems." I stood stunned by her words. Was this really how they saw me? Cold, aloof, incapable of love? I remembered all those evenings when I'd come home from work late, tired, and had no energy left for anything but eating and falling into bed. All those weekends spent in the garage fixing the neighbors' cars for extra money instead of being with the kids. But didn't I do all that for them? Didn't I want them to have more opportunities than I had? "If I've been such a terrible father," I said quietly, "why are you here? Why are you living in my house, eating my food, spending my money?" "Because we have nowhere else to go," Lionel shouted, jumping up from his chair. "Do you think we'd choose to live with you if we had a choice? I'd rather sleep under a bridge." "So you don't want me?" I asked. "You just want my house, my money?" "Yes," Shannon screamed. "Hell yeah, we don't need you. We never needed you. Just your money, just this roof over your head." "Thank you for your honesty," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "In that case here." I took 3 envelopes out of my pocket and put them on the coffee table. "What are these?" Harrison asked warily. "Eviction notices," I answered. "You have 30 days to move out." There was a stunned silence for a second, and then everyone spoke at the same time. "You can't do this!" Shannon shouted. "This is our house!" Lionel echoed her. "This is my house," I said firmly, "and I don't want you here anymore." Harrison grabbed one of the envelopes, tore it open, and looked through the contents. "Is this some kind of joke?" He threw the papers in my face. "You think we're going to take this seriously?" "The notices are legally binding," I replied. "If you don't move out within 30 days, I'll sue. You wouldn't dare." Shannon jumped up from the couch and came so close to me that I could feel her breath on my face. "We are your children, your blood. You stopped being my children the moment you decided to put me in a nursing home and sell my house," I replied, not backing down a step. "Get out!" she shouted, pushing me in the chest. "Get out of this room, you miserable, worthless old man! No one ever loved you, not even your mother only tolerated you." Her words hurt more than any physical shove. Martha, did she just put up with me all these years? "Get out!" Lionel was shouting now. "We don't need you anymore. Thank you for everything. Now get out!" They were pushing me out of the room, yelling, insulting me. Harrison stood back, his face contorted with contempt. "You'll regret this, old man," he said quietly, so only I could hear. "You're going to regret it." I walked out of the living room, feeling my knees shake. Behind me, I could hear their voices, angry, indignant, frightened. They didn't believe I would actually evict them. They thought it was a bluff, a last desperate attempt by the old man to maintain control. But I wasn't bluffing. The notices were real, legally binding. They had 30 days to find a new place to live, and I wasn't about to back down. In my room, I sat on my bed, suddenly feeling terribly tired. The events of the day, the emotional confrontation, all of it had taken the last of my strength. But I knew I had done the right thing. For the first time in years, I acted decisively in defense of myself and my possessions. I could hear them continuing to shout in the living room, discussing the situation, planning a response. They were probably already calling lawyers, looking for loopholes in the law, trying to find a way to stay in the house, or worse, get me declared incompetent. But I had the advantage of the surprise factor. They didn't expect me to know their plans. They didn't expect the quiet, uncomplaining old man to suddenly fight back. And they certainly didn't expect me to take legal steps to evict them. I took Jet Holt's business card out of my pocket and put it on the bedside table. I'll go to see him again tomorrow to discuss the next steps. I have to be prepared for the kids not to give up without a fight. The sound of breaking glass came from the living room, followed by more screaming. They were losing control, and that was a good sign. In anger, people make mistakes, say and do things they regret. And I needed their mistakes, their rash actions that would only strengthen my position. I lay down on the bed without undressing and closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I felt something akin to contentment. I was finally taking control of my life. Even though it was painful, even though it meant a final break with my children, it was my choice, my decision. The last bill had been paid. Now a new stage of my life was beginning. A life without constant fear, without humiliation, without silent patience of betrayal from the closest people. It began to rain outside, its drops drumming on the roof as a rhythmic reminder that life goes on, no matter what. And my life would go on too, albeit lonely, albeit filled with the bitterness of betrayal, but it would be my life, and I would live it by my own rules. There was a knock at the door, sharply, aggressively. I didn't answer it. They could scream, threaten, plead, but I wasn't going to listen to any more of their lies. The eviction notices were on the table in the living room, and no words could change that fact. I woke up before dawn, when the first rays of sunlight were just beginning to peek through the slits in the blinds. The night was restless. I was awakened by the slightest noise, fearing that the children might do something against me. After midnight, however, the house was quiet. They had probably retired to their rooms to think about what had happened and to plan what to do next. Carefully, trying not to creak the floorboards, I got out of bed and went to the window. Outside, Norfolk was slowly waking up. Sparse cars passing by, early birds hurrying to work, a newspaper delivery man on a bicycle tossing packages onto the front porch of every house. An ordinary morning in the suburbs. Who would have thought that behind the facade of this neat two-story house, such drama unfolded? I quickly washed and shaved and put on my best suit, a dark blue, a little worn at the elbows, but still decent. I'd worn it to Martha's funeral and had only taken it out of the closet a few times since. Today was a special day, the day I would finally bring this painful phase of my life to a close. At 7:30, I left the house without eating breakfast. I had no appetite, and the kitchen seemed like a war zone that was best left alone. On the way to the bus stop, I called Jet Holt from a payphone, another old-fashioned habit of mine, not trusting cell phones. "Mr. Holt, good morning. This is Perkins Winge." "Good morning, Mr. Wedge. You're early today." "Yesterday I served the eviction notices as we planned," I said. lowering my voice even though no one was around. The reaction was violent. I didn't doubt it, Holt replied. Are you all right? They didn't threaten you? Verbally, yes. Physically, no. But I don't feel safe in my own house. I understand that. Well, we can expedite the probate process. And if you'd like, I could accompany you home tonight. My presence might, cool the spirits of your children. I was relieved. The idea of coming home with a lawyer seemed very appealing. I'd appreciate it, Mr. Holt. And there's something else I'd like to talk to you about. In person. Sure. When can you come to the office? In an hour, if that's okay with you. That's fine. I'll be waiting for you. I hung up the phone and headed for the bus stop. The bus came right on time, and in 20 minutes I was already entering the office of Holt and Associates. Jet Holt greeted me with the same reserved affability as yesterday. He led me into his office, offered me coffee, which I gratefully accepted. The morning chill was still there, though the room was warm. So, Mr. Winge, Holt began as we settled into our chairs, you mentioned that you wanted to discuss something else. I took a deep breath. What I was about to do was a drastic step, but I didn't see any other way out. I want to sell the house, I said. Holt raised an eyebrow slightly, the only sign of surprise he allowed himself. Are you sure? From what I understood from our conversation yesterday, this house means a lot to you. It did, I corrected him. Now it's filled with nothing but bitter memories. I can't stay there. Every corner will remind me of the betrayal. Holt nodded. I understand. Well, selling is your right. Do you have a buyer in mind? No, but I'd like to sell the house as soon as possible. And there's one other condition. I want to retain the right to live in it for life. That will make it difficult to sell, Holt said. Not many buyers will agree to such conditions. I understand, but I'm not ready to move immediately. I need time to find a suitable place to live. Holt thought for a moment. There is one option, he said at last. I have a client, River Hill Development. They're buying up property in your neighborhood for a big project. They might be interested in your house, even if it's for life. The land is more important to them than the house. Sounds reasonable. I nodded. What do I need to start the process? I can call them right now, Holt suggested. If they're interested, we can set up a meeting for today. The sooner the better, I agreed. Holt dialed the number and briefly outlined the situation to his contact in River Hill. Judging by his remarks, the interest was immediate. They can send a representative by 2 o'clock, Holt said, hanging up the phone. That gives us time to update your will and prepare all the necessary documents for a potential sale. For the next few hours, Holt and I worked on the paperwork. I officially excluded Shannon and Lionel as heirs, instead naming the homeless animal shelter as the sole beneficiary. We also prepared a pre-sale agreement that included a clause for me to live in the house for life. At 2 o'clock, a River Hill representative arrived, an energetic woman in her 40s named Willow Blood. She quickly went through the paperwork, asked a few questions about the condition of the house and location, and then made an offer that exceeded my expectations. $450,000, including your lifetime residency, she said. That's below market value, given your condition, but I think it's a fair price. I looked at Holt, who nodded slightly. I agree, I said. Great, Willow smiled. I'll prepare all the necessary paperwork and contact Mr. Holt as soon as possible. If everything goes smoothly, we should be able to close the deal next week. After she left, I turned to Holt. There's something else, I said. The money from the sale. I want to donate it to a charity, the same one that's in the will. Holt looked at me with some surprise. Are you sure? It's a considerable sum, which could provide you with a comfortable life. I have a pension, I answered, and a small savings. I have enough. And this money, I don't want the children to think they can get it somehow. I want them to know they won't get a house or money. Never. Holt nodded. I understand. I'll prepare all the necessary documents. And now, He looked at his watch. "I think it's time for us to visit your children." We left the office at 3 o'clock. Holt drove his black Lincoln with confidence, but not in a hurry. We didn't talk much on the way. Each of us was absorbed in his own thoughts. I thought about how Shannon and Lionel would react when they found out that I was not only evicting them, but disinheriting them and selling the house. Would that be too harsh? It might be. But wasn't it cruel to plan to send me to a nursing home against my will? Wasn't it cruel to steal my money, to lie to my face, to ignore me in my own home? As we pulled up to the house, I noticed Harrison's car was parked in the driveway. So he's not at work. They're probably all gathered to discuss how to counter my actions. "Ready?" Holt asked, turning off the engine. I nodded, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. Was I ready? No, but there was no retreat. We walked up to the porch and I pulled out my keys. But before I could put the key in the lock, the door swung open. Harrison was standing there, his face tense. "Finally," he said. "Who's this?" "Jet Holt," my lawyer introduced himself. "Mr. Wedge's lawyer." Harrison gave him a cold look. "Come on in. Everyone's waiting." We went into the living room where Shannon and Lionel were sitting on the couch. They didn't look well, pale, with circles under their eyes. They must have had a sleepless night, too. "Hello," said Holt. "I represent Mr. Winge in matters concerning his estate and inheritance." "We don't need formalities," Shannon said. "Dad, did you really bring a lawyer? We're family. We can work this out amongst ourselves." "Not anymore," I replied. "After what you were planning to do, we're not family anymore." "Dad, listen," Lionel intervened. "We overreacted last night. We said something we didn't mean. You know how it is in the heat of an argument." "I know," I nodded. "In the heat of a quarrel, people often tell truths they wouldn't normally tell." Holt coughed. "If I may, I'd like to clarify the legal side of the matter," he said, pulling a folder of documents out of his briefcase. "Mr. Winge has served you with eviction notices that are in full compliance with the law. You have 30 days to vacate the premises." "We're not going anywhere," Harrison said. "This house is our home. We've lived here for years." "As guests," Holt retorted. "The house belongs exclusively to Mr. Wedge. Here are the documents that prove his ownership." He laid copies of the deeds on the table. Shannon grabbed them and looked them over quickly. "Okay," she said, setting the papers aside. "Let's say you own the house, Dad, but we're your kids. You can't just throw us out on the street." "I can," I replied, "and I will. But that's not all. Mr. Holt, please continue." Holt pulled out another document. "A month ago, Mr. Winge updated his will. The new version excludes his children, Shannon Frith and Lionel Winge. New Hope Animal Shelter, a homeless animal shelter, was designated as the sole beneficiary." A heavy silence hung in the room. Lionel turned even paler, and Shannon clenched her fists so white her knuckles turned white. "You can't do this," she whispered. It's not fair." "Is it fair to steal money from your own father?" I asked. "Is it fair to not pay your bills while living in someone else's house? Is it fair to plan to send a person to a nursing home against their will?" "We've already explained," Harrison interjected. "It was a misunderstanding. We never planned—" "No more lies." I raised my voice. "I heard your conversation, every word. Buy a medical report. Send him to a nursing home. Sell the house and split the money. Every word. Every goddamn word. A word." Shannon covered her face with her hands. Lionel lowered his head. Only Harrison stood straight, his face nothing but cold fury. "And that's not all," I continued, nodding to Holt. He pulled out the last document. "Today, Mr. Winge entered into a tentative agreement to sell the house to River Hill Development. The deal will close within a week. Mr. Winge retains the right to live in the house for life, but the developer will be the new owner." "What?" Shannon looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "You sold the house?" Our house? My house, I corrected. And yes, I sold it. For $450,000. Jesus, Lionel exhaled. Dad, why? We could have made an arrangement. I don't want to make any more arrangements with you, I said. You've lost my trust. Forever. Okay. Harrison held up his hands in a conciliatory gesture. Let's say you sold the house. But the money, that's a fortune. You could have bought yourself an apartment and split the rest between the kids. That would be fair. I shook my head. You don't get it yet. I'm transferring all the money from the sale to a charity. The same one listed in the will. The animal shelter. There was dead silence for a second, and then Shannon laughed hysterically. Homeless animals? You're giving almost $500,000 to dogs and cats? Instead of your own kids? At least they'll be grateful, I replied. Which is something that can't be said for you. Shannon jumped up from the couch and rushed toward me, but Holt stepped between us. Mrs. Frith, I wouldn't recommend that you do anything that could be construed as assault, he said calmly. It will only make your situation worse. What situation? She shouted. We don't have a situation. We have nothing. That selfish old bastard has robbed us of everything. Our home, our inheritance, our future. Shannon, calm down. Lionel tried to pull his sister away, but she lashed out. No, I will not be calm. He can't do this to us. He can't just wipe out all those years. You're the one who crossed them out, I said quietly. With your actions, your attitudes, your plans. We are your children. Shannon dropped to her knees, her voice trembling. Daddy, please. We made a mistake, we admit it, but don't punish us so harshly. Please. I looked at my daughter, a 47-year-old woman kneeling before me, and felt nothing. No pity, no anger, no satisfaction, only fatigue. Stand up, Shannon, I said. This is humiliating. I'm not getting up until you promise to call this whole thing off, she sobbed. Please, Daddy, we're your family. I don't have a family anymore, I replied. The decision has been made and is not subject to revision. Shannon lifted her crying face. This is all about Mom, isn't it? You're doing this because she loved us more than you? Because you were jealous of our closeness to her? I felt something tighten in my chest. Martha really was closer to the kids than I was. She knew how to connect with them, how to listen, to understand, to forgive. But I never envied that. On the contrary, I was glad my children had such a mother. It has nothing to do with your mother, I said. It only has to do with your actions and my reaction to them. He's right, Shannon, Lionel said suddenly. We've brought this on ourselves. We were only thinking about ourselves, about money, about the house. Not about him. Shannon looked at her brother in disbelief. You're on his side? After everything he's done? I'm not on anyone's side, Lionel replied. I'm just saying we deserved it. Maybe not as harsh a punishment, but definitely something. Harrison, who had been silent all this time, suddenly intervened. Enough of this circus, he said sharply. Shannon, get up. We're not going to humiliate ourselves in front of him. He walked over to his wife and helped her up. You know what, Perkins? He continued, looking me straight in the eye. You do whatever you want. Sell the house, give the money to the dogs, throw us out on the street. But remember, when you're lying there alone, sick and useless, we won't come. When you die, there will be no one to hold your hand. You'll die alone, just like you lived. I'd rather die alone than surrounded by people waiting for you to die so they can split the inheritance, I replied. Harrison pursed his lips in a contemptuous grin. Come on, Shannon. We need to start looking for a new place to live. He turned to Lionel. Are you coming? Lionel hesitated, shifting his gaze from me to Harrison and back again. I don't know, he said finally. I need to think. Think fast, Harrison said. You have 30 days to move out. We all do. He took Shannon under his arm and led her out of the room. We heard them go up the stairs, the slamming of their bedroom door, Lionel was left standing in the middle of the living room looking lost and vulnerable. "Dad," he started, but I held up my hand, stopping him. "Don't, Lionel. Whatever you say now won't change anything. You were in this with them. You stole my money. You went along with their plans to send me to a nursing home. You're just as guilty as they are." Lionel lowered his head. "I know. And I'm not apologizing. It's just, I want you to know that I'm sorry. Not for what you found out, but for what we did." He left the room too, and Holt and I were alone. "Well," said Holt, gathering the documents back into his briefcase, "it went about as well as I expected." "Do you often come across situations like this?" I asked. "More often than I'd like," he answered. "Family conflicts over inheritances are the most painful, but you handled yourself with dignity, Mr. Winge, and, if I may offer a personal opinion, you did the right thing." I nodded, not sure I agreed with him. Had I done the right thing, or merely vindictive? Had I been too cruel to my own children, whatever they were? But then I remembered their plans, their lies, their neglect, their years of using me, and the doubts receded. No, I hadn't been too cruel. I had been fair. I had given them what they deserved. "What now?" I asked Holt. "Now we wait," he answered. "We wait for River Hill to get the paperwork ready for the sale. We wait for your kids to find a new place and move out. We wait for things to settle down." I nodded, waiting. I knew how to do that. I'd waited all my life, for better times, for recognition from my children, for peace in my old age. Now I would wait for a new beginning, a life without betrayal, without disappointment, without the bitterness of unfulfilled hopes. Holt left around 6 in the evening, promising to contact me as soon as the documents for the sale of the house were ready. I was alone in the living room, listening to the sounds in the house. The muffled voices of Shannon and Harrison were coming from upstairs, apparently arguing about something. Not a sound came from Lionel's room. I sat in my favorite chair, looking at the familiar walls, at the pictures on the mantelpiece, at the shabby rug Martha had chosen, and thought about how soon it would all be mine. The house I loved so much would be taken over by developers. Maybe they'll tear it down and build something new and modern in its place. A piece of history will disappear, a piece of my life. But maybe that's the way it should be. Maybe it's time to let go of the past, with all its joys and sorrows, to start a new chapter, even if it's a short one. I got up from my chair and went into the kitchen. For the first time in a long time, I felt like eating. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The 30 days flew by like a blink of an eye. They were strange days, filled with heavy silences, roundabouts in the hallways, occasional encounters in the kitchen, accompanied by tense glances and reserved nods. My children and I lived in the same house, but it was as if we were in parallel worlds, intersecting only out of necessity. Shannon and Harrison were the first to find a new place to live, a small apartment on the east side of Norfolk. They moved out on the 25th day without saying goodbye. I knew they were leaving only by the sound of the front door closing and the rumble of the engine of their car taking the last of the boxes of belongings away. Lionel held on to the last of it. Several times he tried to talk to me, to start some kind of conversation, not about forgiveness. No, he knew that was impossible, but just about something, about the weather, about the news, about some trivia. I answered briefly, restrained, not keeping the conversation going. I had nothing more to say to him. On the 29th day, he came to me for the last time. "I'm leaving tomorrow," he said, standing in the doorway of my office. "I found a room at a friend's house." I nodded, keeping my eyes on the watch I was fixing. "Good. Dad," he paused, choosing his words, "I know you won't forgive us, and you'd probably be right. But I want you to know that I'm really sorry, not for getting caught, but for what we did." I lifted my eyes and looked at my son. At 52, he looked aged, battered by life. Deep wrinkles furrowed his face, and gray was silvery in his hair. Once he had been a handsome boy with bright eyes and an open smile. Once he had a future. "I know, Lionel," I replied, "and that makes it all the sadder." He nodded, realizing that was the most he could hope for. "Good luck to you," he said quietly, and left the room. The next day, when the eviction notice expired, I sat on the veranda and watched Lionel load his few belongings into the shabby sedan. He did it slowly, as if he were delaying the moment of saying goodbye to the house he'd grown up in. When the last box was stowed in the trunk, he turned and looked at me. I nodded at him, not to apologize, but to say goodbye. He nodded back, got in his car, and drove away. So I was alone in the big, empty house. The first few days of being alone were strange. I was used to the constant presence of other people, to the sounds of their footsteps, voices, music, the noise of the television. Now the house was immersed in silence, broken only by the ticking of the clock and the creaking of the floorboards beneath my feet. I wandered through the rooms that used to be occupied by the children and had mixed feelings. On the one hand, I felt bitterness at the fact that everything had ended so sadly, that the people I loved were capable of betrayal. On the other, relief, even a kind of liberation. No more pretending that everything was all right. No more having to put up with neglect and lies. I could finally live the life I wanted to live. On the fourth day of my loneliness, the doorbell rang. Jet Holt stood on the doorstep with a file folder. "Good afternoon, Mr. Winge," he said. "I'm here to tell you that the River Hill development deal is closed. Here's your copy of the contract and a check for the transfer to the charity." I invited him in, and we sat down in the living room. Holt explained the details of the deal, confirmed that my right to live for life was in the contract, and that the money had already been transferred to the homeless animal shelter. "You know," he said, finishing the official part, "the director of the shelter was very touched by your donation. She asked me to tell you that thanks to you they will be able to expand the facility, buy new equipment, and save many more animals." I nodded, feeling strangely satisfied. At least my money would go to a good cause. "And what happens to the house after—" I hesitated, not wanting to say, "after I die." "After the end of your lifetime residence," Holt finished tactfully. "River Hill plans to demolish the house and build part of a new residential complex, but that's a long way off. In the meantime, the house is all yours." When Holt left, I sat looking at the signed documents for a long time. It was over. The house no longer belonged to me, though I could live in it for the rest of my life. The children were no longer allowed to cross the threshold of the house. The will was changed. The money was transferred. All ties were severed. A strange feeling came over me. Not grief, not joy, but something in between. As if I'd closed a heavy door and turned the key, cutting off a part of my life. A painful part, but still mine. I woke up the next morning with an unusual clarity of thought. I knew what I wanted to do next. Lionel's room, the brightest in the house with windows facing east, was perfect for a workshop. I'd always dreamed of a spacious room where I could do watch repair, a long-time hobby that had grown into a real passion after retirement. I spent the day moving tools and parts from my small office to the new workshop. I set up workbenches, adjusted lights, and organized boxes of parts. This physical work helped him not to think about the emptiness of the house, the broken relationships, the uncertain future. By evening, the workshop was ready. I was sitting at the main workbench, admiring the result of my labors when I heard a knock at the door. Had one of the children decided to return? My heart clenched at the thought. I wasn't ready for another confrontation. But on the doorstep stood an unfamiliar older man about my age, with a neatly trimmed gray beard and shrewd eyes behind old-fashioned glasses. "Good evening," he said. "My name is Renford Gimble. I'm your neighbor across the street, number 17. I shook the outstretched hand. "Perkins Wedge. I apologize for not introducing myself sooner." "Oh, I only moved in 3 weeks ago," Renford said with a wave of his hand. "I bought the house from the Thompsons when they decided to move to Florida." I nodded. The Thompson family had lived across the street for years, but we rarely spoke to each other. They were much younger, with small children always in a hurry. "I noticed that you were alone," Renford continued. "I thought perhaps you could use some company at dinner. I made lasagna, too much for one person." I hesitated. It had been a long time since anyone had asked me to dinner, and I was used to social interactions. But there was something about this man that appealed to me, maybe his directness, maybe his quiet confidence. "It would be my pleasure," I finally replied. "Give me a minute to clean up." Renford's house was the opposite of mine, bright, modern, minimalist. Bookshelves took up an entire wall in the living room, and in the corner stood an antique record player with a collection of vinyl records. "Do you like music?" I asked, looking at the spines of the records. "Jazz, mostly," Renford answered, setting the lasagna on the table. "But there's some classical and 60s rock and roll. And you?" "Honestly, I haven't listened to music in a long time," I admitted. "I used to love Frank Sinatra and Nat King Cole." "Oh, I have both!" Renford cheered up. "Let's listen to them at dinner." So, to the sound of Sinatra singing "My Way," we ate lasagna, which turned out to be excellent, and talked. Renford was a retired literature professor, having moved to Norfolk after his wife died to be closer to his brother, his only remaining relative. "And your family?" he asked as we moved on to dessert, an apple pie bought at the bakery on the corner. I hesitated, not knowing how much to tell. "It's a complicated story," I finally answered. "I have 2 kids, but we don't talk anymore." Renford nodded, not showing surprise or curiosity. "Family relationships can often be difficult," he said, "especially as we get older, when everyone goes their own way." His tact and understanding were comforting, and I suddenly told him the whole story: the children's neglect, their plans to send me to a nursing home, my decision to evict them and sell the house. Renford listened attentively, neither interrupting nor judging. "You were harsh but fair," he said when I finished. "Betrayal by loved ones is the most painful wound, and you don't always have to turn the other cheek." His words were strangely comforting. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to justify my decision, to explain or defend it. When I got home around 11 p.m., I felt different, not so alone, not so lost. It was as if this unexpected dinner with a stranger who had become almost a friend in one evening had opened some kind of door to a new life. The next day, I started working in my new workshop. I had accumulated several antique clocks in need of repair. Some I had bought at flea markets, others were given to me by acquaintances who knew of my hobby. Each clock was a challenge for me, a mystery to be solved. Why did they stop? What broke in their mechanism? How to bring it back to life? Working with the clock calmed me, gave me a sense of control and satisfaction. Each repaired part, each restored movement of the gears brought a small victory. And at the end, the special pleasure of the ticking sound, of knowing that I had brought something back to life that was thought to be hopelessly broken. A week later, Renford invited me to dinner again, and a few days later we went together to a flea market in a neighboring town. He was looking for rare books. I was looking for antique clocks and parts. We spent an entire day rummaging through dusty boxes, talking to vendors, haggling, and sharing our finds. It was fun, a word that has long since disappeared from my vocabulary. At the end of May, I decided to check out the homeless animal shelter to which I had donated the money from the sale of my house. It was a small building on the outskirts of town, with a spacious yard where the dogs could run and play. The director of the shelter, an energetic middle-aged woman named Dorothea Crouch, greeted me with genuine joy. "Mr. Wedge, I can finally thank you in person." She shook my hand with such enthusiasm that I feared for my old bones. "Your donation is a real miracle for us. We have already started renovating and expanding the premises. Would you like to see it?" She took me around the shelter, showing me the improvements already made and the plans for the future. Dozens of dogs and cats, from tiny puppies to graying old dogs, lived in enclosures and cages. They all looked at us with hopeful eyes, wagging their tails, meowing, trying to get our attention. "Are these all waiting for new owners?" I asked, stopping at an enclosure with an elderly mongrel whose face was half gray. "Most of them are," Dorothea answered. "But some, especially the old ones or those with health problems, are rarely taken away. They usually stay with us until the end." I looked at the old dog, and he looked at me. There was a wisdom and patience in his eyes that only comes with age and experience. He reminded me of myself. "And this one?" I asked, nodding at the dog. "Does anyone want him?" Dorothea shook her head. "That's Brutus. He's about 12 years old, which is old for a dog his size. He has arthritis and heart problems. Those rarely find a new home," I wondered. My house was empty and quiet now, too empty and too quiet. "I could take it," I said, surprised at my own words. Dorothea looked at me doubtfully. "Are you sure? He requires special care, regular vet visits, a special diet." "I have enough time and energy to take care of him," I answered. And we seemed to understand each other. So Brutus appeared in my life, a calm, sedate dog with a graying muzzle and wise eyes. He did not demand a lot of attention, did not make noise, did not create problems. He was just there, lying at my feet when I was working on the clock, basking in the sun on the veranda, snoring quietly at night by my bed. With Brutus's arrival, the house no longer seemed empty. There was life in it again, though not human life. Sometimes, looking at the sleeping dog, I thought of the strange irony of fate. I had disinherited my own children in favor of a homeless animal shelter, and now one of those animals was closer to me than my own blood. By midsummer, I had established a certain rhythm of life. A walk with Brutus in the morning, slow and leisurely given our shared arthritis. Then work in the workshop on the clock. In the afternoon, reading the books Renford had lent me, or the new issue of the antique watch magazine to which I subscribed. In the evening, sometimes dinner with Renford, sometimes a quiet evening at home with Brutus and the TV. It was a simple life, without drama or conflict, without betrayal or disappointment, a life where I could finally be myself without trying to conform to anyone else's expectations or demands. One evening, sitting on the veranda with Renford and watching the sunset, I asked him, "Do you never regret the past, about the decisions you've made?" Renford hesitated, stroking his beard. "Do I? Sometimes. But not about the decisions, but about the time I wasted on useless worries, on trying to please those who didn't appreciate it. Years spent chasing other people's dreams instead of my own." I nodded, realizing what he was talking about. "You know," Renford continued, "there's a technique in literature called anagnorisis, a moment of realization, an epiphany when the hero suddenly realizes the truth about himself or others. This moment is often painful but necessary for growth and change. I think you survived your anagnorisis, Perkins, and came out of it stronger." I've never been great with literary terms, but I understood what he was saying. Yes, I had experienced a painful epiphany, seeing the truth about my children, about myself, about our so-called family, and that epiphany, bitter as it was, set me free. "I have no regrets," I said, and it was true. I don't regret knowing the truth. I don't regret acting decisively. The only thing I regret is the years wasted on a relationship that was never real. Brutus, who was lying at my feet, lifted his head and rested it on my knee as if for support. I stroked his gray muzzle. But now I had a new life. Not a perfect one, not what I had envisioned old age to be like, but real, my own. Renford raised his glass of lemonade. "To a new life, Perkins, to honesty with yourself and others. Here's to the courage to be yourself. even if it means being alone. I raised my glass, and we clinked glasses. To a new life, I repeated, looking up at the sunset that colored the Norfolk sky in shades of gold and purple. Life went on, not as I expected, not as I planned, but perhaps exactly as I needed it to be. A life for myself, without compromise or pretense. A life with Brutus, with my new friend Renford, with my watch and my books. A life in which I was finally not a ghost in my own house, but a full human being deserving of respect and peace. And if sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night, I felt sad about what might have been if the kids and I had been a real family, I just stroked Brutus's warm fur and reminded myself, the past is the past. Now I have the present, and maybe a few more years of the future, and I will live them in my own way, not for ungrateful children, but for myself.